Well, greetings everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Topic UFO. Tonight we're going to be speaking with a longtime ufologist, and he's going to be talking to us regarding his thoughts, theories on Roswell. Now, a lot of people think that there was one crash at Roswell, and that was it. But that just may not be the case. We're gonna hear more about that here in just a second. Our guest is Chuck Wade, and he, among other things, operates the UFO Film Festival down in Gallup, New Mexico. There, but tonight, he's here to talk to us about his theories. So, Mr. Wade, are you out there?
I am here.
Chuck, how are you tonight? Thanks so much for joining us.
Doing great. It's a beautiful day. It snowed and everything else today. It was beautiful.
Oh, so it did end up snowing. I'm
for about 2 to 3 hours, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad it didn't take down the telephone lines and keep us from doing our show.
I am also.
So, Chuck, you have some personal thoughts regarding Roswell. The generic explanation, generic story is that, there was one saucer that crashed there, but you seem to think that's not correct. Is that right?
That is correct. It could not possibly be correct.
So tell us, Chuck, what is your thought, your theory on this very historic case?
To start off with, the first book that came out about the Roswell case and plains of San Augustine, where the UFO crashed there, was called The Roswell Incident, by Berliner and Moore and Stanton Friedman and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this book came out in 1980. I read it in 1981, and there's a page in here that really changed my life. On page 81, there's a picture of Bill Brazel saying that he had parts and pieces of the UFO that crashed close to Corona, and they had it in this tavern in Corona. Turns out that's my dad's bar there in Corona.
Oh.
So as soon as I read that passage there about Bill having those pieces in Dad's bar, I called up Bill, because I'd known Bill and Shirley ever since they'd came back from Alaska, and I was quite young. I was 7 years old about that time in those days, but I've known them many years. Well, I read that passage to Bill, and then I asked him, Bill, is this true? And he said, yes, this is true. So I decided at that moment, that was 1981, to dedicate myself finding out what happened at Roswell. And I have learned a considerable amount. But every time I learn one item, there's 10 items I don't know. So the more I know, the dumber I get. But I know a lot, and I'd be happy to share it with your audience.
So, you were around 7 years old when the Roswell incident happened?
That is correct.
And from what I understand, you lived somewhat close, or?
I was born and raised in the town of Corona, New Mexico. And whenever they talk about the Roswell incident, it actually happened very close to Corona, about 30 miles southeast of Corona. And whenever Mac Brazel found all that debris there at the Buster Ranch next to Corona, Mac Brazel came to Corona and asked my father to go out and help him move it, because this debris was in the way for the sheep to go to water. And there's a lot of debris. There's a couple hundred yards wide and maybe 3/4 of a mile long. We're talking about a lot of stuff. But Dad did not go. But I have known about it ever since that time.
So what is your actual theory here, Chuck? Like I said, generically, it's one saucer crashed. The Army or whoever came and took it away. Tell us what your entire theory is.
Okay, in the book, The Roswell Incident, the theory is that two UFOs ran together there somewhere up in the sky, and one of them crashed close to Corona, New Mexico. The other one went about 150 so miles south and west of Roswell and crashed on the plains of St. Augustine. And that's what the theory has been for years and years. But I can assure you, it did not happen. These two crashes happened on 2 different days. The crash that I physically have parts of here on the table next to me, that UFO crashed the night of the 1st of July, 1947. And the United States military was at that crash site to pick it up the morning of the 2nd of July, 1947. My question to anybody that's been in the military, how could the military have gotten word that something crashed on the plains of San Augustine, and by noon the next day they have a flatbed truck, a crane, a bulldozer, and a whole company or maybe even a battalion of men ready for a bivouac? How could they do that? They couldn't possibly have done it. And there are Barney Barnett, one of the fellows that actually saw this crashed UFO on the plains of St. Augustine. His wife kept a diary, and she said that Barney Barnett was on the plains of St. Augustine on the 2nd of July. Whenever you go to the affidavits of like Walter Hott, he made an affidavit before he died to be opened after his death, and he said that in that affidavit that the crash there by Corona happened on the night of the 4th of July, 1947. Also, another crash that happened that same night, basically 53 miles due west of Roswell by the Jim Ragsdale site, and in Jim Ragsdale affidavit says that it came down about 11 o'clock on the night of the 4th of July, 1947. But also, they don't know when the crashed or came down there by Corona because no one saw it. And it came down, and it was laying out there for a short while. And then Mac Brazel discovered that craft. He came to Corona, asked my dad to go out. Dad didn't go. Then Mac went up to the drugstore there for the Perkins and asked those folks to go out to the crash site, and they couldn't go either. But she helped Mac make a phone call from her drugstore there in Corona to the sheriff in Roswell. And then Mac went over there, visited with the sheriff, and the sheriff told the military about it. That's how it got started.
So altogether, there were actually 3?
There were 3 there at Roswell and 1 on the plains of San Augustine.
3 in Roswell.
And the 3 that crashed there by Roswell happened within a minute of each other. Because there was, in 1947, there was a lady that had 2 children driving from Carlsbad over to the little town of Vaughn. And that during the night of the 4th of July, there was these 3 very, very large flashes. And what I surmise is that one of those flashes went off, and that craft flashed and crashed, and that would be the crash north of Roswell that Walter Hott and Colonel Corso are familiar with and talk about. Then there was another flash lit up the desert and the mountains, and this one flashed and crashed, and it was the one that crashed there by Corona. The third one flashed, but it did not go out. It just came towards the Capitan Mountains, and it took about 10 minutes to get there. And I think that would be the craft that Jim Ragsdale says in his affidavit that it crashed there close to he and his girlfriend. And that was all on the night of the 4th of July, 1947.
Wow. Now, is your theory that the military picked up all 4 of these crafts?
My theory is that the United States military shot all 4 of these crafts down and came and got them. Yes, sir. And they were using high-powered radar intentionally.
So, yeah, because, I mean, 4 craft, and why do you think, I guess the reason there were so many of them, even in that area, was because of all the nuclear stuff that was going on in that area at that time?
Well, there's a possibility. There was a gentleman a few years back that came forward, and he passed away not too long back, that said that he, during this whole period of time, whenever the Roswell incident happened, that he had saw 3 UFOs fly over Walker Army Air Force Base, or Walker Base. Go ahead.
No, please keep going.
What I think happened is, and it actually starts this whole, can I go back even further than that to 1945?
Absolutely.
Okay. As most of you may know, the first atomic bomb was detonated as an experiment on July the 16th, 1945 at Trinity Site, New Mexico. That's down in southern New Mexico. And that was about a month later, which would be August 1945. There was a UFO flying around down there and got into a radar beam and crashed. And this big radar beam had been built, or the big radar set had been built on top of Oscuro Peak, which is not very far from Trinity. And the military had put this radar up there to do whatever they do with radar on an atomic site. Well, on August of 45, this UFO got tangled up with that radar beam and crashed. And there's 2 little boys, and Paula Harris has done a lot of research on this. These 2 Spanish boys reported hearing this crash, and they went over the hill there, and they saw these little aliens running around, and there's still some fire going on from the brush down there. And they reported this information to their parents. The military came out and retrieved these items. So the military knew from that experience that the military could bring down a UFO using high-powered radar. So the military ordered 3 high-powered radars to be built. One of them was up by Chama, New Mexico, in that whole area close to Colorado. One here just outside of where I live now, about 20 miles at Continental Divide, close to Gallup, New Mexico. And that was out there, big unit was out there for years. And the third high-powered radar was a mobile unit, and it wound up in the fall of 1947 in Muerte, New Mexico. And the reason they had these 3 large mobile, radar units, yes, thank you. They had these 3 large radar units made and installed was to guard the skies over Los Alamos. There's just no telling how many UFOs had flown over Los Alamos. So with these 3 radar units, they were able to guard the skies, and no telling how many crafts they actually brought down because of it. But anyway, that's what happened. They made these units. But once they had one of them made, and it was a mobile unit, and then what happened, in my opinion now, is never Kenneth Arnold in the state of Oregon or Washington saw those 9 UFOs flying about 1,500 miles an hour.
Right.
Well, that made national news. And I'm going to say, like the President of the United States said, bring down a UFO and find out what it is. So they took that mobile unit from White Sands Missile Range up into the plains of St. Augustine. And the plains of St. Augustine is surrounded by very large mountains. There's about 1,500 square miles in there. And sure enough, they were able to bring down a UFO. That was the military. And then whoever is in charge of all this may have learned what there was UFOs flying over Roswell. So they took this unit from the plains of San Augustine, took it over by Corona, and brought down 3 UFOs that night. And so they had 4 of them right there really quick.
Wow.
And that, I think, is the genesis of the Roswell and the plains of San Augustine's crash.
Now, fellow ufologists, let's just say that, what kind of response have you gotten back from the UFO community regarding your theory?
Well, they don't like me worth a hoot. Not worth a hoot. Because they have books to sell and they have to defend their theories, and their theories are wrong. I have no book, and I have theories that I feel definitely are correct. The first time I went to the plains of San Augustine was the summer of 2004. Mr. Art Campbell had been digging on this and researching the crash on the plains of San Augustine for several years. And then in the summer of 1947, I'm sorry, not correct, 2004, Mr. Campbell from the state of Oregon was a presenter at the Aztec Symposium, and he had parts and pieces from that craft. And I was just enthralled because I live just north of there, about 150 miles. So as soon as Art finished his lecture, I shook hands with him. We went to lunch. We became friends. And he took me down, my wife and I, my younger brother, and I hired 4 Navajo workers. And we went down there and we turned dirt and we found some items.
Uh-huh. So you actually think that these items are pieces of a UFO?
I have no doubt in my mind. We've had these items, several of them analyzed. What I've got here in my hand now is the first piece we found, and it's called Wade 1. We found it in 2004. And this piece of metal is about the size of my hand, and it's turned over basically like a taco shell in many ways. And there's some really unusual characteristics about this. I doubt if y'all can see it from there. But right along this edge here, and most all these edges here are turned over, like a person would hem a skirt or something.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's with all the foil we got. All the pieces of foil basically is like that, even the one that's down the size of a nickel. The outside edge is turned over. And it's very wrinkled, and we've had this analyzed all the way down to the isotopes. And the isotopes in this piece of metal that I have in my hand is nowhere even close to terrestrial.
Now, I know that in talking to you during our pre-call, you had mentioned that you had sent these things off for lab analyzation. What did they come back and what were the results of the test?
Okay, I'll just show you one right here. I may not be able to see all that long list of stuff.
Yeah.
Different elements. You may not be able to read it, but this is the I-beam, and there's probably 30 different elements in there. And some of these pieces have up to 40 elements. But the main matrix is aluminum in all cases. But like this I-beam that I'll show you later, in magnesium, these are parts per million. There's 9,776. Magnesium, silicon 3,700, potassium 150, chromium, manganese, iron 1,740, Cu, copper, or whatever that is, 1,920. Uh, every piece of this metal is different by a lot. But each piece of metal has between 30 and 40 different elements in it. And why they have 30 and 40 elements in a little piece of foil? It works. That piece of metal is on that craft to do something. And therefore, it takes this type of an analysis put together properly, and then put you correct kind of electricity or current or whatever they use in there, and the thing goes.
So this combination of elements that came back from the lab report cannot be matched up to any existing metal alloy at all.
Not even close.
Wow.
In order for a piece of foil, say that that one I just held up there, in order to be let out of the factory into a person's kitchen, it has to be 99.5% or pure aluminum. This aluminum we have is, let's say 95% all the way down to considerably less than that. And I'm holding an analysis right here of 6 pieces of metal that has just a tremendous amount of research in this. To all the different elements that they've looked at, they've only looked at for 60 elements. There may be other elements of quantities that they haven't even looked for yet. And this was put out by Steve Colbert. He's a professional metal analyzer, and also he not only does a lot of the analysis himself, but there's a number of these analysis that he can't do there at his lab, that he sends it out to other qualified labs. And also the isotopic ratios are nowhere even close to what's here on Earth. Let's say a piece of copper, no matter where it is on Earth, it's within 1 or 2% of itself with the isotopes, all on Earth. Some of these isotopes relative to Earth, to extraterrestrial, some of it's off as much as a factor of 10 times. And they're all off and skewed quite a bit. So they're definitely not of this Earth. The metal is. Also, in many cases, this metal could not possibly be made on Earth, because we have nothing on Earth that is without gravity. This metal was made without gravity. And why I can say that is, let's say my notebook here is the thickness of that piece of metal, which is about twice the thickness of a piece of paper, because it's about 40 microns. Okay, there may be iron, or in many cases there's iron, and the scientist that I was at whenever he was doing some of this would call a great big piece of iron up right here at the top a boulder of iron. And then right here at the very, very bottom, there'd be another boulder of iron. There's no way that liquid aluminum could be frozen solid enough to hold those boulders at the top and bottom. You could always, forever, see a top and bottom to that if it had gravity. Ours does not have gravity. Also, if you roll these materials, if you start squishing it in, the outsides would be a lot more of the different elements until you get to the center, and the center, until you get the force on it, is the same as it was. So you can tell immediately whether this stuff was rolled out. These items were not rolled. I have yet to find anybody, Alcoa Aluminum and the guy that headed up the formulation for the Aluminum Association, they have no idea how it's made. Not one of them has told me how it was made. It makes no sense.
They're
the way
stumped.
that we manufacture.
These guys are stumped.
They're stumped. 100% stumped.
And And you found these just going out. I take it you had some information of where to go, but you had these diggers that you hired to go out there, and you were able to actually locate these pieces of whatever it is.
We didn't find too many pieces just digging here and there and everywhere. It mainly hit in 3 different locations where it came in and actually touched ground with the nose of this craft, and it really took a beating. I'll show you some pieces here in a little bit. That had to have been on the leading edge, and then it skipped over and made a trench for a ways, and then it popped out and stuck in a little hill over there about 10 foot high, 20 foot. So those were where and Art Campbell knew where those places were, at least 2 of them he did. And that's where he found most of his stuff. But we have found mainly through just looking at the surface after rain. But it's pretty well picked off now. We were there in April of this year. And we didn't find anything that's big. We found 7 small pieces, say about this big. You could went around those pieces with your fingers. But they were definitely from that craft.
Well,
I'm holding my hand. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm holding in my hand a little piece of foil. Don't show where it's a hoot there. But this little piece of foil here, whenever I found it, just walking along, I thought it's a gum wrapper because it is so thin. And I was wearing really dark shades because it's really sunny there. And so I put it in my pocket. And that evening, my wife wanted to know where I got it. And after I got it out of my pocket, and you can see that outside edge. Well, just a second. Where is it? Oh, I don't know if you can see that. But I'm telling you, folks, that is really, really thin. But the deal is, this outside edge is turned over. It's turned over all the way around. So I will guarantee you. I'll guarantee you.
So it's got a lip almost all the way.
It's turned over like like you turn a piece of paper back on itself.
Right.
But it's not just turned over. If you turn something over, there's a bulb. There's a big circle in the end.
Right.
There is absolutely no bulb. Whenever they put that together, they flattened it. I had a piece of this on my desk for almost 2 years before we noticed that all the edges were turned over, because it is not this thin here. But every piece we have has that outside edge turned over. So why they do that, folks, one of you guys in the listening audience, give some thought of why in the world would they have all these edges of these, and I'm going to say thousands upon thousands upon thousands of pieces of foil turned over. Oh, here's something on that area, and why I think there's thousands and thousands of pieces. For one thing, whenever Gerald Anderson, as a 5-year-old boy, he saw this crashed craft, and he said it looked like an exploded aluminum factory. There's stuff all over it. And my theory is, and I'll explain it, I've not done this very often, folks, if ever, like this. What I'm doing is holding my hand a piece of foil. This not foil. This is actually metal. And this piece right here is cut out. We've taken all that out for examinations. But this piece of metal here is about 1/8 of an inch thick. And what I mean, whenever it hit Earth, it really took a beating. It's all kinds of beat up and folded in, and it's really tough. Now that's the outside of the craft.
Now, what you were saying something about, excuse me, something about some type of energy or power being put into this metal?
Yes.
As far as propulsion, is that what you were saying?
Propulsion, yes. It's my theory and others that we've been talking with. and why I was bringing up the craft, the side of it, like this right here is the exterior of the craft, and then there's a piece that we're calling honeycomb. This piece right here has 6-sided holes in it, and they're between an eighth and a 16th of an inch thick. And in each one of these holes, there's little lines in it. There's like 5 or 6 of them in that little bitty piece there. And in my opinion, every piece of this metal has a piece of fiber optics to it. Whenever Gerald Anderson, as a 5-year-old boy, was looking at this craft, the craft had a split in it where the aliens got out of it. But also there was what Gerald Anderson thought there was a horse's tail hanging out of it. And Gerald was wondering how in the world they put a horse in that little thing. Turns out that all those fibers is fiber optics. And if you get a roll of fiber optics, say that big, in a 32-foot diameter craft, those fiber optics have to go to something. And I'm going to predict that every piece of the metal in that craft has got a piece of fiber optics to it. So whenever they take their energy, and I feel the energy that they use is called energy from the vacuum, and that's all the energy in the world is in the vacuum. There's almost nothing solid in this whole universe. It's all energy of one form or another.
Right.
But the ETs have figured out a way to take the energy from the vacuum, go through a little box about the size of a small briefcase, and run it out into these pieces of metal in different forms. And then by going through the fiber optics to all these different kind of metals, they can turn that light, orange, yellow, blue, and turn it on or off. Or whenever you're looking at these crafts, it doesn't show any doors. Some places they do have windows, others they don't. But whenever they touch a little button, apparently the thing just opens up and you walk in, walk out. So every piece of metal on that craft is moving and is tied in to something that makes it move. I wished I knew what.
And then is it something about the electromagnetic polarities?
I don't think it would be that. That would be way too small. And you'd have to be too close to a planet or a galaxy, or you'd have to have. I don't think it's magnetic. I don't.
Okay.
I think that it's more of a rather, well, sort of like electricity that comes out of a power plant. But they just have figured out how to do that from one star system to another really, really fast. Or maybe they don't even go fast. Maybe it's interdimensional. I don't know, folks.
Yeah.
And I wished I did.
Well, listen, Chuck, we're starting to get down here on time, and I want to ask you about the film festival as well. Is there anything else you would like to say regarding the Roswell crash theory? Is there anything?
Well, I think it's time that we got it correct. Recently, within the last 2 or 3 years, the guy wrote a book. I won't mention his name, but here's his book called Roswell and the Right. Well, he went on contortions to make that metal German. Then right after this book came out, there was a lady, Ann somebody or another, wrote a book about Area 51 and also the metals of the craft, the UFO crashes by Roswell, and she says it was Russian. So those things are not Russian or German. They're extraterrestrial. And that's what I want people to realize, that we are being hoodwinked, and until we get our scientific and people and our key researchers to do some actually research, we're going to have problems. Well, it's time to get off our can and learn what the world happened. Just like this craft that I have parts of. There's 3 guys that's running around the country for the last 21 years saying this didn't happen. I have been in contact in their lectures whenever they say the plane to San Augustine craft did not happen. And I've got pieces of it in my pocket. Whenever I show the audience that medal, these guys don't like it worth a hoot. And I'll tell you what, it's time that we get to give a hoot and get these guys off the stage to say it didn't happen. I'm here to tell you it did happen. And I've got proof. And let's get on with studying this and find out what happened, rather than just taking these old theories and defending their books.
Well, I tell you, I agree with you. We definitely have to get to the truth, and you're very energetic towards this topic. What do you have anything planned? A next step, or I mean, have you basically taken this thing as far as you can go?
I'm sure we're not there yet with in science. There's a young man up in Pennsylvania I've been contacting with you for about a month now. He already knows more than anybody that I know about this metal, because he's finding metals. I won't say the metal, but he's finding items that could easily be a UFO crash up there. And he's only like 16 years old, but he's taken an interest, and he's contacted a lot of people. And he's doing wonders. And I think that we need to have people like this young man to be interested in what in the world really happened. And whenever you talk about our UFO Film Festival, here's the flyer for it. We're going to have, for the first time, speakers on Friday night and Saturday night. And this will be our 10th anniversary annual event. Friday night, we're having Mr. Harry Drew from Flagstaff, Arizona. And whenever you read the literature, there's someplace, what? Oh, it's Kingman.
Kingman, Arizona.
Kingman, Arizona. Thank you. Whenever you read the literature, there says there is a crash at Kingman, and then much of the literature, big gobs of the literature saying it didn't happen. Well, Harry Drew is going to tell us next Friday night that it wasn't one, there's several. To me, that's absolutely exciting. And he'll tell us why they were so many over there. And then also he thinks there's a fourth one. I am reasonably sure there's a fourth crash by Roswell. What we need to do, folks, is get out there and find it. We know that it's going to be about 25 foot in length. We have a good idea where it's at, but we don't know. But anyway, and then Saturday night, there'll be two gentlemen that are rangers with the Navajo Nation, well, let's call it police department, and they're going to tell us about what has happened on the Navajo Nation for more than 10 years that these two fellows have been. Part of their daytime job is to find out about UFOs and paranormal out on the Navajo Nation.
Wow.
There is a lot of stuff happening out on the Navajo Nation that I think these guys are going to. I can hardly wait to hear them.
Yeah, that sounds.
For 2 years, I had a delivery service out on the Navajo Nation, so I spent many, many, many miles out there, and I invariably picked up hitchhikers. I'm not scared of nobody, because I know any little lady out there could whip me, so I'm not going to fear, or anybody else. But I picked up hitchhikers, and invariably I turned the conversations to the UFOs, and there was not one person that I ever picked up that did not have a very personal UFO story.
Yeah.
And I can hardly wait to hear these guys talk.
Now, what are the dates of the film festival?
The 18th and 19th of October.
Okay.
And we'll start at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and go to 11 o'clock that night. And Mr. Drew spent much of his last year on the road giving his lecture. And he's going to he has updated his lecture from last year, and we're going to be the first audience to hear his next year's lecture. I can hardly wait.
And the theater that it's in Gallup, New Mexico.
Yes, it's in it's El Moro Theater, and it's an old theater, but boy, is it pretty.
Yeah.
We've got all new everything in there. New restrooms, new seats, new everything, new sound systems, new electrical systems. It's just beautiful. And the sound system, I have a very serious hearing problem. In that El Moro Theater, I can hear every word.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
I think it's going to be great.
Well, if for the viewers out there that are near Gallup and can get out there, it sounds like it's going to be quite a couple of nights. And this is something you've been doing for 10 years, right, Chuck?
Yes, my wife and I have done this because we did it. We found our first pieces in April of 2004. And then I was talking to a fellow and said, we need to show it to people. So he and I came up with this idea. And then my wife and I have taken this for the last several years, and just she and I put it on.
Yeah, that's great.
Here's the big piece of stuff. This piece right here is about, well, it got broke off. A friend of mine, I showed it to the other day, and he just took it and snapped it.
Oh.
But this piece is 16 inches long and about 8 inches wide. Folks, try to disprove that. And also, whenever we found this, Gerald Anderson was using the metal detector. We had a professional photographer who has been doing a lot of research on filming with my research. She was taking a picture of it. There was a trained graduate botanist digging the soil, and my wife and I were on our knees next to whenever this piece right here came out of the ground. Folks, don't tell me that we got that at the grocery store.
Wow, that is amazing, Chuck.
And then that honeycomb stuff. This is what it looks like. Never came apart. One of them came apart.
Yep.
It's just, but that thing right there is extremely important for the propulsion system of that craft. How it works, I don't know. Somebody out there needs to study it, big time. But go ahead. I'm done.
No. It's been an excellent, absolutely fascinating conversation, Chuck. I knew it was going to be, and I couldn't wait for tonight to talk to you. So you didn't let me down, that's for sure. You did.
Maybe we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely. I think we should stay in touch, and if you have any updates with your research, or other people start joining in, such as this young man up in Pennsylvania, I think you said.
Yes, that's correct. He's going to be a real asset to the UFO community.
That's great. Yes, absolutely. We'll stay in touch, and I'd love to have you back on. It's been a pleasure, Chuck.
Likewise, it's a pleasure for myself. Thank you.
All right, and you
and the audience.
And you thank Nancy for helping us get linked up tonight.
Without her, I'm sure we would not be talking like this. She's also an asset.
Yes.
Huge asset.
Absolutely.
Thank you, and it's been a pleasure.
Okay, Chuck, you have a good evening, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
The answer is to keep it. You believe it when you find something screaming across your mind.
Well, greetings everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Topic UFO. Tonight we're going to be speaking with a longtime ufologist.
Not possibly be correct.
So tell us, Chuck, what is your thought, your theory on this very historic case?
To start off with, the first book that came out about the Roswell case and the plains of San Augustine where the UFO crashed there was called The Roswell Incident by Berliner and Moore and Stanton Friedman and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this book came out in 1980. I read it in 1981, and there's a page in here that really changed my life. On page 81, there's a picture of Bill Brazel saying that he had parts and pieces of the UFO that crashed close to Corona, and they had it in this tavern in Corona. Turns out that's my dad's bar there in Corona.
Oh.
So as soon as I read that passage there about Bill having those pieces in Dad's bar, I called up Bill because I'd known Bill and Shirley ever since they'd came back from Alaska, and I was quite young. I was 7 years old about that time in those days, but I've known them many years. Well, I read that passage to Bill, and then I asked him, Bill, is this true? And he said, yes, this is true. So I decided at that moment, that's 1981, to dedicate myself finding out what happened at Roswell. And I have learned a considerable amount, but every time I learn one item, there's 10 items I don't know. So the more I know, the dumber I'm.
Chuck, how are you tonight? Thanks so much for joining us.
Doing great. It's a beautiful day. It snowed and everything else today. It was beautiful.
Oh, so it did end up snowing. I'm
for about 2 to 3 hours, yes.
Ah, okay. Well, I'm glad it didn't take down the telephone lines and keep us from doing our show.
I am also.
So, Chuck, you have some personal thoughts regarding Roswell. The generic explanation, generic story is that, there was one saucer that crashed there, but you seem to think that's not correct. Is that right?
That is correct. It could.
And he's going to be talking to us regarding his thoughts, theories on Roswell. Now, a lot of people think that there was one crash at Roswell, and that was it. But that just may not be the case. We're gonna hear more about that here in just a second. Our guest is Chuck Wade, and he, among other things, operates the UFO Film Festival down in Gallup, New Mexico there. But tonight, he's here to talk to us about his theories. So, Mr. Wade, are you out there?
I am here.